It's an honor to be asked to deliver this address this evening, and this is also the first time, I shouldn't admit it, but it's the first time I've been to the museum. It's a really beautiful space. It's customary when you're giving a talk like this to start with a couple of jokes to, win the audience over and get them on your side. But we're here to talk about poverty in the United States, and there's nothing funny about poverty, so no jokes tonight, just the truth. It was more than 50 years ago, at a time when John F. Kennedy was in the White House, that Michael Harrington published his groundbreaking book, The Other American Poverty in the United States. Our eyes were supposedly opened to this grave problem back then. And the truth is that a lot of progress was made over the next several years. But poverty has now mounted a ferocious comeback in the United States, taking a fierce toll on tens of millions of people, many of them very young. In the years since Bill Clinton left office, the ranks of the poor have expanded by 15 million. Many of the gains made in the years following the publication of The Other America have been reversed. We now have more poor people in the United States than at any time since the Census Bureau started keeping accurate records back in the 1960s. And yet our mainstream politicians hardly ever mention the subject of poverty. When public officials talk about economic issues, they're almost always focused on the middle class. If there's any discussion of poverty at all, it's usually about how best to cut the already meager programs that offer the poor some assistance. Michael Harrington complained that in the prosperous early 1960s, the poor had slipped out of consciousness of mainstream America. But they were there all right, in enormous numbers, just as they are now, whether or not the politicians and the media care to pay any attention. Tens of millions of Americans, said Harrington, are at this very moment maimed in body and spirit, existing at all levels beneath those of human decency. If these people are not starving, they are hungry, and sometimes fat with hunger, for that is what cheap foods do. They are without adequate housing and education and medical care. In an introduction to a 30th anniversary edition of The Other America, Irving Howe wrote that the book was a cry of the heart and appealed to the conscience of the good people of America. He said that Harrington was asking, how can you allow such a scandal to fester in this country? Well, I would ask the same question today, more than a half century after it was first posed. How can we allow this scandal to continue to fester? Nearly 50 million Americans are poor right now in 2013 in the richest nation ever to inhabit the earth. These are fellow citizens of ours, men, women, and children, who are sinking into the quicksand of ever-deepening material deprivation and isolation from society's mainstream. Another 50 million people are what we call the near poor. They're hanging on just a notch or two above the official poverty line, which means they can feel the awful flames of poverty licking at their heels. The people in those two categories, the poor and the near poor, comprise nearly a third of the entire American population. 1 in every 5 American children is poor, and 1 in every 3 black children. The United States has the highest child poverty rate in the entire industrialized world. And this is the case at a time when the economic elite in America, that small sliver of the population at the top of the economic pyramid, are enjoying riches that could never previously have been imagined in all of our nation's history. The mayor of this city, New York, is personally worth some $25 billion. But among Michael Bloomberg's constituents, the 8 million residents of New York City, 1 in every 5 is mired in poverty. The homeless family caseload in New York is so great, the shelters have to turn people away. So we have on the one hand a mayor with $25 billion, a dozen or so homes, and his own private airplane, A mayor so rich, he disdains living in the mansion provided by the taxpayers for the city's top elected official. But on the other hand, we have this mayor's constituents sleeping in the rain on cardboard in the streets. That seems more like a medieval scene of nobles and serfs than what I had imagined America in the 21st century would look like. The bankers, the CEOs, the hedge fund managers in this town, in their sleek black chauffeur-driven limousines, drive past the poor and the homeless without even noticing them, without for a moment giving them a second thought. We need to face the fact that the interests of the financial and corporate elite, with their eyes and their minds on the stock markets and their personal portfolios, are not the same as the interests of the poor. So the poor need someone else who is willing to stand up and speak for them. The truth is that the economic conditions in the United States right now are substantially worse than the rhetoric of the politicians and the coverage of the press would lead us to believe. More than 20 million Americans are living in extreme poverty. They're trying somehow to survive on less than $11,000 a year for a family of four. It's hard to imagine how that's even possible. That's destitution. The extreme poor are the folks who will eat one meal a day instead of two to conserve food. They're the ones who can't even think about getting dental work done. They're the ones, and I've covered this so many times over the years that I've lost count, they're the ones who, when their children die, they can't even afford to bury them. It is wrong to allow this tragic state of affairs to continue. Michael Harrington's question still hangs in the air like a dark cloud, a rebuke to all of us who are fortunate enough to be doing well. How in the world can we allow such a scandal to fester in this country? For those who might think that poverty is something that just affects black people or brown people, think again. Many of the problems we've long associated with the inner city can now be found in other venues. Spend a little time in some of our down-the-hill suburbs or Rust Belt communities or rural towns and villages, and you'll see the poverty and joblessness, the broken families, the out-of-wedlock births, the drug and alcohol abuse, the domestic violence, and on and on. This is what economic deprivation has always done to people. We're in denial about just how bad things have gotten. A report came out last year showing that the life expectancy for the poorest and least well-educated white Americans had dropped by 4 years just since 1990. That's what poverty can do to people. Can you imagine a 4-year drop in life expectancy since 1990? That's the kind of thing you expect from a third world country or the Soviet Union after the collapse of communism over there. I thought that would be a big national story, but I was wrong. The New York Times ran it on the front page, but I didn't see it anywhere else. And that's what I mean when I say we're in denial. People run to the shelter of denial when they just can't face the truth, when the truth seems just too awful to contemplate. And that's the story with poverty in the United States right now. So we're in trouble here, deeper trouble than most people realize. And I am here tonight to tell you in no uncertain terms that this near silence on the subject of poverty needs to end. We need to get tipped off. Look around. Look at what is happening to people. Let everyone within earshot know that it is not all right to keep catering to the interests of the millionaires and the billionaires while working families are lining up at food pantries in New York and in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Missouri and just about everywhere else in these United States. We have to spread the word that what's been happening has been egregiously unfair and inequitable and has hurt people by the scores of millions. It's wrong, and it is time for it to end. Now, I am not an advocate of violence. I take my cue from Dr. King. But I am an advocate of militancy. We need a militant, anti-poverty, pro-worker movement in this country, and why we haven't seen it yet, I do not know. Too many people have been silent for too long, and that silence is keeping poor people in their place, and that place is one of suffering, a wretched environment indeed. Frederick Douglass told us, power concedes nothing without a demand, and he never suggested that that demand be made in a timid tone of voice. It's not light that we need, said Douglass, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, said Frederick Douglass. Our task today is to reach beyond our comfort zone and begin to rally others who are concerned about poverty and inequity and who share our desire to bring fairness and justice to ordinary Americans. And then we need to take this fight to the streets. We need to march. We need to protest. We need to badger the media to pay more attention to the poor and the unemployed and the young people of America whose futures are being so cruelly curtailed by the unfairness of this economic system. Dr. King's last campaign was the poor people's campaign. That should be our next campaign. Make no mistake, this is not a fight for the faint of heart. But if our approach is strategic and smart, and our hearts and minds are strong, it is a fight that we can win. It's a fight that we should make. In my view, it's a fight that we must make. Thank you very much.